Welcome into the Arrowhead Addict podcast. I am Matt Verderame. We are sans Ben Heisler today because the man has a kid who is sick at home, and that is more important than the Chiefs and the Bills, although there are very few things that are more important than the Chiefs and the Bills this week. You don't believe me? Just turn on any national sports outlet, and you're going to be able to confirm that. Now, look, this is going to be a really interesting game. We're going to get to a lot of the different things. Of course, this half hour, we're going to focus more on some of the gambling side of it. And then at 4 o'clock Central, myself and Patrick Allen will be here to talk all things Chiefs Bills. And we'll break it down. We'll give a prediction. We'll go through the whole deal, as we always do each and every week. All right. So let's start off right at the top. Okay. The line came out before the Chiefs played the Raiders on Monday night. It came out Sunday night. The Bills had just hammered Pittsburgh. The line went to 2. The Bills were favored by 2. Before the Bills beat the Steelers, it was a pick 'em. Then it went to 2. Then the Chiefs beat the Raiders in a weird game, granted, 30-29, by no means their best performance in the world. Okay, they got down 17-0. You all know the story. The Chiefs beat the Raiders, and the line went from Bills -2 to Bills -3. So Buffalo, in a lot of books, sitting -3. Now, some books are sitting -2.5. Okay. Get them 2.5, get them 3 if you like to bet. If you like to gamble and you're betting on the Chiefs, you'd love to get them at 2.5 because then you get the hook, right? So, Kansas City, not usually an underdog here. And there's there's a lot to get to in regards to that. So, Patrick Mahomes in his career as a starter has been an underdog 8 times in his career. In those 8 games, all of which are on the road, by the way, he has never been a home dog in his career. In those 8 games, he is 7-0-1 against the spread. He has never failed to at least push. In 7 of those times, he's flat out won the spread outright. And in 6 of those 8 games, he's won the game straight up. Okay. So Mahomes as an underdog is about as terrifying as you could possibly be. Obviously, this year they've only been an underdog once. It was against Tampa. Mahomes went out, played the best game he's played all year. The Chiefs played the best game they've played all year, won the game. Obviously, didn't just cover, won it going away. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see how this all shakes out. Last year, when the Chiefs played in the regular season against Buffalo, the Chiefs were 3.5 points favored in most books. Of course, Buffalo came out, blew the doors off the Chiefs. The Chiefs were awful in that game, and the result was a 38-20 win. The Chiefs had 4 turnovers in the game, all these different things. Okay, now, last year in the playoffs, I'm going to look that up right now, actually. So, I believe the Chiefs were favored. I don't remember for the life of me if it was a 3-point spread. If it was I think it was less than 3. I think it was. But I'm looking it up. The point being, I know the Chiefs were favored because, again, this is the only time Mahomes has ever been an underdog at home. So I'm just going to give a quick thought on all that. By the way, the Chiefs were a 2-point favorite. The Chiefs were a 2-point favorite in that playoff game. I understand the idea that the Bills are favored in this game. Like, I get it. I get it. The Bills are really impressive. Okay, they have the best point differential in the league. They have blown out the Rams. They've blown out the Titans. They've blown out the Steelers. Lost to the Dolphins, but outgained them by about 300 yards at a weird loss that day in Miami. And then against Baltimore, to the Bills' credit, they got down 20-3 in the first half and then came roaring back, scored 20 unanswered, won the game 23-20. The Chiefs, on the other hand, have won games twice by blowout. They killed the Cardinals, and they blew the Bucs out. The Buccaneers were never seriously in the game. They've played 2 games where they've been okay, depending on what portion of the game you've looked at, the 2 divisional wins, and then, of course, that abomination against Indianapolis. So I understand the idea that, look, if you look at the games, the Bills have been the more impressive team week in and week out, and they have been. Like, there's no arguing that. What I would argue is every time the Chiefs are challenged like this, in the Mahomes era, they respond every single time. Every time people think they're going to lose, the game that sticks out to me the most, for whatever the reason, was the Week 3 game in Baltimore in 2020, the Monday night game. The Chiefs were 3.5 point dog in that game, depending on what book you were using. And it felt as though everybody was, Jackson was coming off his MVP season, and they had lost in the playoffs. But hey, here come the Chiefs, and this is going to be where the Ravens kind of flex a little bit of muscle. And Mahomes went in there and went berserk. And of course, that was the famous, like, Jackson was the number one player in the NFL's top 100 list, and Mahomes was fourth, and he counted to 4. Mahomes went 31 of 42 that night for 385 yards and 4 touchdowns. That doesn't mean that he's going to do that against the Bills this week. Like, you do have to understand the Bills have a great defense. The Bills are not just a good team, they're a great team. But I would posit that the Chiefs are also a great team. The Chiefs have been to 2 Super Bowls in the last 3 years and won one of them. The Bills haven't gone, largely because they've had to play the Chiefs in the playoffs. Okay. Offensively, even without Tyreek Hill, the Chiefs are averaging more points per game. I think this line should be a pick 'em. That's what it was before last week's games when both teams won. I don't care the Bills will out the Steelers. I'm of the opinion, I honest to God think the Steelers are the worst team in football. They're 32nd on my power rankings. They're horrible. Now, give the Bills credit. They beat them like they're a horrible team. They killed them. But I don't look at that game and come away from it ultra impressed. I come away from saying that's what the Bills should have done. That's what they did do. Not knocking them, but the Bills played a really good game. I'm also a big believer that every week in the NFL is unto itself, right? And I think the Chiefs the last 3 weeks have shown you that. Horrible football, amazing football, okay football, they win. If the Bills are the play for you this week in terms of gambling, I think the theory behind that has to be the Bills are a more cohesive team right now. They're a more explosive team. They've been together for years. This Chiefs team, very much a new team in a lot of ways. And also, you could make the argument, look, while I'm sure the Chiefs would love to win this game, the Bills have to have motivation through the roof, okay? The Bills, whether or not some guys will admit it or not, this game is a huge game to them. They lost in 2020 in the AFC title game, which I think hurts, but like, okay, you have a great year. That was a real ascension year. You live with it. They weren't as good as the Chiefs. I think they would tell you that. In 2021, they were as good as the Chiefs. They may not have been better, but they were as good. And they go in there, and of course, what happens in 13 seconds and so forth, right? If you're the Bills, you couldn't be more motivated to win this game. I mean, you've been waiting for this game since January. I mean, you have been waiting forever for this game. And now you have it. And the only downside, if you're the Bills, which will lead me into my point of why, if you're going to bet the Chiefs, you bet the Chiefs. The Bills secondary is beat up. Micah Hyde out for the year, herniated disc. Tre'Davious White is now back to practicing, but won't play this week. Those are 2 all-pro level players in your secondary. One that's gone for the year, one that'll be back soon, but isn't going to be back week 6. The Bills have played 5 teams this year that either flat out can't block at all, or in the case of the Ravens, who are the only team that don't fit that category, by the way, in the case of the Ravens, are an adequate blocking team, but probably average is the right word, okay? The Chiefs, while their tackles are average, and they are average despite all the hammering, they are average tackles. Their interior is phenomenal. And so you look at this and go, if the Chiefs can block the way they blocked, say, against Tampa, if the Chiefs can block in this game, or even the way they did, frankly, the last 2.5 quarters against the Raiders, the Chiefs are going to have their opportunities against the secondary. And I respect the hell. Jordan Poyer is an awesome player. He's one of my favorite players in the league to watch. And then you look at Taron Johnson, who's a very quality corner. But the Bills don't have other guys in that secondary that would scare you right now. The Chiefs have the advantage when throwing against them. And look, Matt Milano's great in coverage. Kelce, for whatever the reason, I mean, maybe the reason is just he's Travis Kelce. He has torched the Bills in his career. He's killed them. Milano's been on the field, off the field. None of it's mattered. They tried to match Milano up in the playoffs against him at times. I mean, hell, go back and watch the game-winning touchdown. Milano's had no success against Kelce in his career. And the Bills are going to ask Milano to cover him. I mean, that is going to be one of the ways the Bills play this game unless they change from what they've always done. So I think if you're going to bet the Chiefs, it is Kelce's going to have another huge game. The Chiefs' offensive line is a lot better than at least 4 of the lines that the Bills have seen this year, if not all 5. And with those injuries in the secondary, Chiefs can score. Like John says in the chat, I understand not being sold on the Chiefs defense right now. I think the Chiefs defense is an average defense. I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's great. I think it's average to good depending on who they're playing. And depending on the scheme that they like. If I had to look back at the games, they were great against the Cardinals. They were good against the Chargers. They were actually, to be fair to the defense, really good against Indianapolis. They just couldn't get any help from the other 2 phases of the game. But they were bad against the Raiders. And against the Bucs, the Bucs is a weird game because when you get up 21-3, the game's going to go kind of skewed. But they were solid, I would say, against the Bucs. I know it's a weird thing saying they gave up 31 points, but part of that is also like they're up 21-3 immediately. And so you're always going to be in this weird space where like you're kind of giving up points for time and the other team's got to be desperate and throw constantly. It just kind of throws the balance of the game out of whack. But I would say the Chiefs are anywhere from average to good defensively, but they're far from what Buffalo is defensively. So look, I'll give my pick and everything later on. And like I said, we have myself and Patrick at 4. But I think if you're gambling, that's the way you have to look at this. It's either you feel like Buffalo is just going to be able to shred on the outside with Davis and Diggs, and Allen's going to have time in that pocket if the Chiefs don't blitz, and they're going to score a bunch of points that way. And then defensively, they can get some pressure off the edge, and they can hold up enough. And then you factor in, of course, all the motivation they have and everything else. And if you're going to bet on Kansas City, it's the fact that, look, you think the Chiefs can hold up enough up front, that the Chiefs have a huge advantage when throwing against that beat-up secondary, and that defensively, Kansas City can do enough things to hold the Bills into the 20s. You know, they can hold them into 24, 27 points. I mean, the Bills are averaging 30 a game right now. Okay. The Bills are the second highest scoring team in the league behind only the Chiefs. So that, look, all that said, I think, frankly, that's why, to me, I think it's a weird thing that the Bills are favored in this game. I think it should just be a pick. If it was in Buffalo, I'd say Buffalo by 3. I think the Bills are playing slightly better football than the Chiefs right now. I also think the Bills have played teams that are conducive to the way the Bills play. These teams can't block. None of these teams have a high-end passing attack. None of them. The Rams, I mean, look, we all thought coming into the year the Rams would be better. The Rams have Cooper Kupp, and that's it. They can't block, and Allen Robinson stinks right now. Right now, anyway, he stinks. The Titans have no receivers, and Tannehill's an average quarterback. The Dolphins have receivers, but they have an average quarterback in the line. The Ravens have a very intriguing quarterback, but he's, I think, 17th in the league right now in passing yardage because they have no receivers, and Mark Andrews is their only weapon. And the Steelers are the worst offense in football. I mean, they had a rookie making his first career start, a horrible offensive line, and a hilarious scheme. So there's a lot of there's a lot of ways to parse this game, but I think the Chiefs and the Bills are the 2 best teams in football. I think both of these teams are going to hang in there. I would be surprised if either got blown out. I think if it happens that way, it's because one of them plays a miserable game. It's because one of them turns the ball over, they take a bunch of penalties, that kind of a thing. I don't think it's going to be something where these 2 teams both play to their levels and it's just a hammering. I would be very surprised. I think it would have to be because one of these, one of the quarterbacks is an off day, throw some picks, somebody fumbles, somebody takes some killer penalties, and then the game gets sideways and it snowballs. You see on the bottom of the screen here, if you're watching, the total for the game is 54, the over-under. I have to take the over in this game. like, you have to take the over, don't you? I am someone that sometimes thinks, like, whenever you see a high total like this in the 50s, I I still think, like, normally I would say, well, maybe you go the other way because the total gets inflated. 54 doesn't seem that much for this, does it? Like, I know the Bills are really good defensively, but if you said to me, just the Chiefs total, would you take the Chiefs over under 24 points? I mean, I'd take them over. The Chiefs are averaging 32 points a game. Like, I would take the Chiefs. I would take the Chiefs to score 27, 28, if not even more, because of the way the game will go and how many points these teams are going to have to score. It's one of those deals where you look at it and go, I have a hard time making a case that this is going to be 23-20 or 27-23. Like, this feels like a game that's going to be 31-28, 30-27, 34-31. I got to go over here. I got to go over. And while I won't give a final score prediction, I'm going to take the Chiefs to cover the spread. And by the way, if the Bills were plus 2.5, I take the Bills to cover the spread. Like, I think in this game, I'm taking the points either way. I'm taking the points. They're too even. They're both too great. I can't swallow points. And I'm sure as hell not swallowing points for the home team. There's no way I'm doing that. That I can't do. That I can't. There's no way that I am walking away from this thing saying, yeah, you know what? I'll take the Bills to cover at Arrowhead. The other part of this I do think matters, and I don't normally care about crap like this because I think it's usually overblown, a waste of time. Mahomes is very, very aware of everything that goes on with him. Everything. Like, he's not a jerk about it, but he's clearly very aware of it. This whole week has been one big Buffalo party, right? I mean, there's the thing going around right now that every ESPN analyst picked them. And there's been all this talk about, is Allen better than Mahomes? Is he clearly better than Mahomes at this point? And then you factor in the line of the game and how they're underdogs in this game. Like, that, I think, is going to light a fire under their ass, and especially his ass, like nobody's business. I don't think they need a ton of motivation for this game anyway. It's such a big game. But I've always felt, and I've always said this, I've said this many times in this podcast, professional athletes, one thing they do not like is to be embarrassed and to be disrespected. Those guys have worked too hard to get to where they're at. They've worked too hard in the Chiefs' case to have the success they've had. When you start disrespecting a team, and all week they've got to listen to how they're a lesser than, especially when they haven't been lesser than, they've been better than in this case. That is a burr under the saddle. I mean, go back and look at that Tampa game. All week, the Buccaneers, now to be fair, the Bills haven't said a word, okay? All week, the Buccaneers have talked, or they talked, right? Shaq Barrett, Jamal Dean. I mean, they just kept talking, and they got their asses kicked up and down the field all night long. To the Bills' credit, they have not said anything. But a lot of the media has done it for them. The odds makers have done it for them. It has just been this idea that the Chiefs are just not as good. They can't possibly win this game. That stuff, I do think, is going to provide ample ammunition for Kansas City. Now, is that enough to win the game? Look, the bottom line is you got to go out and you got to perform. You got to execute. Okay? You can have all the motivation in the world, but if you don't go out and execute, it doesn't stack up for anything. But I do think it'll give them an extra level of, okay, hey, look, we're going to have to go out there. We're going to have to have we have something to prove. And anytime this team said something to prove, it has not gone well for the opponent. Maybe that changes this week. Maybe the Bills are so great that it doesn't matter, and the Bills go out and they dominate them. And you know what? The Bills get a hammer lock on the pole position for the number 1 seed. And you go, okay, all right. If they see each other again, it's probably in Orchard Park. On the side of that, the Chiefs go out, they win. They all of a sudden have a big advantage toward the number 1 seed. And then you're sitting here going, yep, it's probably going to be back at Arrowhead if they see each other again. By the way, for anyone who cares, these two teams are already scheduled to play each other for next year, and the game's at Arrowhead again. So it feels like a divisional game, doesn't it? I mean, it really does. It feels like these two teams are in the same division. They play each other so often. I am looking forward to this game. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think it is going to be a game where you're going to have highlights for days. And I think it's a game, too, if you're just a football fan, right? Like, put aside if you're a Chiefs fan, if you're the Bills fan who's listening to this podcast, put it aside for a second. This is what football's about. Like, I remember watching that playoff game in January and thinking during the game, during those final 2 minutes, this is one of the greatest games of all time. Like this, and that was before 13 seconds happened. And overtime, it was actually during I think it was the TV timeout going into the final couple of minutes. You have to appreciate it as an NFL fan. In my opinion, the two best quarterbacks in the league, Mahomes is number one, but the two best quarterbacks in the league, two really good coaches. One who will end up in the Hall of Fame, McDermott, we'll see how it plays out for. Great staffs. Great players around those quarterbacks. I mean, Hall of Fame level players, right? Like the Digges of the world, the Kelseys of the world. Great settings, whether it's in Kansas City or it's in Buffalo, like one of the great settings. It's so much fun to watch these teams play each other because they're great. They're great teams. And sometimes you got, and sometimes you get. Like, that's the way it works. And Mike in Sweden's asking, how does it work in terms of the schedule? So the schedule just rotates in terms of, just use the Chiefs, for example. So obviously they have the 6 divisional games. And then every year you play a full division of another division. And it's just on a rotating basis. Like this year, the Chiefs play the AFC South. Last year, they played the AFC North. So next year, they get the other division. They get the AFC East. So that's how you already know they're playing the Bills. I don't know how the NFL determines who's home and away for those games. I do know there's a rule. You can't play a team more than 3 times in a row in your own building in the regular season. So next year, that'll be the 3rd time in a row at Arrowhead. It'll have to switch after that. But I don't know what the rationale is for why it's in Buffalo or Kansas City, but I do know that it is at Arrowhead Stadium next year. And then also the next year won't matter because they're playing the AFC East anyway. But like if the Chiefs finish first, they play all the other teams that are first place in the AFC division. So like for this year, that's why they play the Bengals. That's why they're playing the Bills, because these teams finished in first and they play the whole AFC South. So that's how the schedule works. But I can't wait for this game. I can't wait. It is the 2 best teams in football going after it. Lay it out there. And you find out who's going to have the upper hand for home field advantage in the AFC for what feels like almost an inevitable rematch come January. I mean, unless these teams get hurt, it would almost feel impossible they don't see each other again, right? I'm going to leave with this thought. And Lucas says in 2024 to 2026, the Bills Chiefs regular season games will all be in Buffalo. Correct, as long as they play each other each and every one of those years. Yes, they would all be in Buffalo. I'm going to leave it on this thought with this game. Enjoy this game. Because you're not always going to be one of the 2 fan bases that gets to be part of this game. And I would also say enjoy it knowing that, look, if the Chiefs win the game, awesome. Unbelievable win. You're in amazing position. But even if the Chiefs lose this game, and I don't even care if they lose big. I don't care if they lose by 30 points. They're fine. They're 4-2. They're clearly the favorite to win the division. And even if they weren't to be the ones, you'd be the 2 seed in this conference. And on top of that, it has no bearing either way, win or lose, on what's going to happen in January. Some guys will be back, like Tre'Davious White and Willie Gay, you hope. Hopefully those guys will be back if they play again in January and they'll be healthy. Other guys, unfortunately, just nature of the NFL, won't be there. That happens. That's the sport we watch and cover. And every game is unto itself. It just is. Every game in the NFL. Look, whatever happens this week, if they see each other again in January, these teams are going to have different plans. They're going to have different wrinkles. The quarterbacks might play a little bit differently. Everything can change. Like if the Chiefs win this game by 30 points, it doesn't mean they're beating Buffalo in January. Would anybody feel like ultra confident that would happen? No. And the same's true the other way. if Buffalo comes in and kills Kansas City in this game, just plays their best game, lays it on them, Chiefs play poorly. I mean, the Chiefs could go to Buffalo and beat them in January. Like, of course it could happen. Enjoy the game. Relish in it. And if you're going to bet on it, again, consider some of the stuff we've already talked about. The Chiefs, 2.5-point dogs at home. First time Mahomes has ever. But home underdog, total is 54. My predictions, betting-wise, and I'll give them to you later on in the next show, I would take the Chiefs to cover. We'll talk about if I think they'll win when I talk with Patrick Allen at the 4 o'clock hour. And I would take the over. All right. Hey, thank you to everybody who was here today. Appreciate you. If you're listening on the Arrowhead Addict podcast, the audio feed, thank you so much. Really appreciate that as well. Again, I will be here with Patrick Allen from 4 to 5 o'clock Central Time. So hopefully we'll see you all back for that. By the way, of course, this show, as always, is sponsored by the Kansas City Beer Company. Make sure you dare to beer different with the KC Beer Co. Go check them out. They are absolutely phenomenal. I had the light pills last night. It was amazing. 100 calories. You never believe it. It's one of the better light beers you'll ever have. Make sure to look for KC beer anywhere it is brewed in the Kansas and Missouri area. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it. For the absent Ben Heisler, who's being a good father and couldn't be here today, I am Matt Verderame. Thank you so much. We will see you again in a few hours here on the Arrowhead Addict podcast.